Hey everyone, welcome to Breakthrough Conversations. My name is Danielle Perry and I am the host. You know by now, I am excited that you're tuned in today to this podcast for a new episode. And if this is your first time, this is a Christian podcast which features people of all ages, and they share a bit of their story about how God has helped them to overcome a difficult challenge, situation, or season in their lives, or maybe they're on their way to overcoming with God's help. And they do share authentically. Well, y'all, this is the final episode of 2024, and it is a two-part episode, and it features a dear friend of mine, Mrs. Algenia White, and the title of this episode is Becoming Saved After Witnessing My Mom's Death. Wow. Y'all, Algenia has an amazing story, and she only shared just a little bit of it. But what you will hear, I believe, will be such a blessing to you. It will encourage you. And if you are one who has lost a parent, particularly one who lost a parent at a young age, I hope that you'll tune in. Or if you know someone who can relate to Algenia's story, please make sure you share this episode with them. And last thing, y'all, this was an archived episode. And what do I mean by that? This episode was recorded over a year ago. All right. There were some episodes that I had that were kind of put on hold for some time, but they are being released now. And so again, Algenia, thanks again so much for sharing your story on this podcast. If her name sounds familiar, it's because she was featured with her husband, Mr. Michael White, on an episode in our marriage series. And please go check it out, y'all, if you missed it. It's very, very significant as they shared what it means to them to build a spiritual legacy for their family, for their children. So y'all, without further ado, get ready, y'all. I want you to enjoy and be blessed. And she is none other than Mrs. Algenia White. Hey, Algenia.
Hey.
How are you this early morning?
I'm doing good. I'm exhausted because I have a lot going on in my life right now, but I am so excited to be here and that I was able to make time to chat with you and to share my story. I'm really excited about that.
Yes, and I am super excited too. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the podcast. It's an honor to me. So before we hop into the questions, I do want you to just introduce yourself and tell a little bit about who you are.
Okay, awesome. So my name's Algenia White. I am originally from Washington, D.C. I do live in Texas now. We've been here for, I think this is our 5th year. I'm married to my husband. I've been married to him for almost 12 years, which is kind of crazy.
Wow.
We have 3 kids, Stephen, Abigail, and Samuel, at varying ages. And I am a mom, a wife, and I'm a teacher. That's my current profession. So.
Yes. And what grade do you teach again?
8th grade science.
Ooh, okay. You're in middle school like Jared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been teaching middle school. I think this is my 7th year in teaching now. And I've been teaching middle school the entire time. So.
Wow. Awesome.
My niche, my thing.
Okay. Hey, when it's your niche as a teacher, then you're right where you're supposed to be. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are going to hop into the questions. And the title as of now of this episode is Becoming Saved After Losing My Mom. All right. So a bit of a heavy, title, but it's going to be a blessing as I hear your story, because what you've already shared with me prior to this recording, my mind was just blown. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, how did she come out of that? Okay. So I'm excited about our audience and myself hearing your story. So I want you to first, though, just share a little bit about who you were as a little girl.
Awesome. When I was little, I was very quiet, very reserved. I didn't say a lot unless I was around people that I trusted. And even then, I was just really quiet. I have 3 brothers. So I have 2 older brothers. They're about 10 years older than me. And then my little brother is like less than 2 years younger than me. And so I was the only girl in my family. And I don't think until I got to a teenager did I realize that my life wasn't as great as I thought it was in my head, maybe. And so I lived with my great grandmother And, you know, like many families, it was a lot of us in the house. It was my aunt and my cousins and my brothers and stuff. So I always had, like, it wasn't a large family, but it was a good amount of people that were always checking on me, making sure I'm good, checking on my grades. And so because I grew up in that size of a community or family, I was reserved. So you didn't hear me say a lot. I've had so many people when I was younger say, oh, I forgot you were even in the room because you didn't say anything, unless you left me somewhere I did not want to be. And then I would cry the entire time. One time my mom took me to like my cousin's house or something. Okay. And you know, cousins, sometimes you see them a lot and sometimes you don't. And so this one, I didn't see them a lot. So I didn't know who these people were. I was like, I don't know. And then next thing you know, I turned around and she's like, oh yeah, I'll come back and get you later. I was like, okay.
Right.
30 minutes later passed and I was like, ma'am, where are you? Where'd she go? She didn't come back for like 3 days. She left me. I cried the entire time. I lied to you. I cried the whole time. My little brother was with me. He's having a blast. But I was just like, I was not ready for this. Like, you got to tell me, warn me something. So. How
old were you?
I was probably like 7, maybe 6 or 7 at that point. And then that's like home for me. And then in school, I was always like really good with doing well in school. My brothers had went to all the schools that I attended, pretty much almost all. And so they preceded me and they were interesting to say the least. So when I got here, they're like, oh, we had your brothers, so we know. And I was like, ooh, yikes. But I love school. I love learning. I love finding out new things and just growing in that knowledge. And so I did really well in school. But again, I was quiet and reserved. Some would say teacher's pet. So, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And you said you were living with your great-grandmother.
Yes.
Wow.
My
great-grandmother.
So my mom's dad's mom. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
I lived with her since I was at least 3 or 4, maybe.
Okay. And how long did you live with her in general or total?
Oh, I stayed with her until I went to college. And then in my first year of college, she passed away. Yep. She was like 91 by the time that happened.
Wow. So, okay. Wow. So about your family, you kind of gave some context around your family and how you all were just, you know, bunched up in your great-grandmother's house and your brothers, and they were interesting. So describe a little more about your family. What was some of the dynamic, looking back now, that, because you said you didn't realize that you weren't really in a good situation at first, right?
Yeah.
So hindsight being 2020, now looking back, talk about your family dynamic a little bit more.
So as far as mom and dad, my mom would come by here and there, but she did not stay with us. I think when I was younger, maybe 3 or 4, I remember being dropped off at my great-grandmother's house and wondering where my mom went. And then I didn't see her for like 3 years or something. She never came back.
Wow.
And then one day randomly she showed up, and like any little kid with their mom, you're like, oh my God, it's my mom, you know, you're like, oh my God, never leave me, you know, that kind of thing. And just, you know, reminding, you know, that my brothers are older, so most of my brothers are older. And so they, you know, were used to that, but they also lived there too. My dad was not around, but when he would come around, my great-grandmother would curse him out so bad and yell at him, get away from here, don't come to this house, that kind of thing, that I became afraid of him. And so if I was, you know, at a friend's house at the end of the block or whatever, this is, you know, in Washington, D.C., so we didn't drive anywhere. We walked to a lot of places.
Right.
If I was, you know, down the street, then my dad would come by. First of all, I'd have to know that that was my dad. And then second of all, he'd call me, and you know, I'm already leery of people. And I'm like, who's this guy? And I would go home. My grandmother would just go off on him. So I was always afraid of my dad. He wasn't around often. And it could have just been because my grandma would, kind of chase him away. So my older brothers instinctively became my father figure. When I was in middle school and I would do well, they would buy me Jordans, or they would like take us out to eat, or if I did well, they would get me something. If we were going to eat, they would get us like, pizza or whatever. And so look, that hindsight of looking back, you're like, wow, most people, their brothers don't take care of them. And, they do live with their mom and dad. Some people, I should say. And so my aunt also lived with us. This is my mom's aunt. So I guess she's like my great aunt, I think. And so, she would walk me to school. I remember being so embarrassed in middle school. She would, no matter how hot it was, she would wear her huge yellow coat and she would walk me. And I'm like, nobody else has to get walked. And she's like, well, I'm sure you're safe. So she would walk me to middle school. I got freedom in high school, but it wasn't that far away. So that kind of helped. But so I had a lot of people helping me and playing a part. And then one of the largest supporters that I had was my cousin. So my aunt's daughter, my cousin, I now call her my cousin mom. But she was so influential in my life. She lived in like Gaithersburg. And so she would drive down every Saturday to take care of her grandma, which was my great grandma, and take her to the grocery store and all that stuff. But she also would buy us Christmas gifts. And I remember she bought me my first training bra because I was like, what's happening to me? And it just happened to be a Saturday that she was there. She's like, come on, I'm going to take you to the store. And my first menstrual cycle, she was there for that. That happened on a Saturday too. Brothers was like, what's wrong with you? Why are you crying? They didn't know, right?
Of course,
so, she was really influential in able to, I guess, function as a teenager and kind of get a lot of stuff because she was like a mom to me. And when my mom was not there. Now, there are periods of time in my life where my mom did live with my great grandmother, but it was wrought with fighting. She would fight my cousin all the time, or my cousin would fight her, depending on how you look at it. They would get into arguments. Fists would be thrown. This is all in the front yard, or my brothers would have to fight. And so, that was a normal part of my youth, of them fighting, or my mom would be in jail. I remember her saying, oh, I saw your dad. And I was like, where? And she's like, oh, we were in jail together. And I'm thinking, how's that possible? And so my older brothers have gone to jail. I think my cousin's gone to jail before that used to live with us. My little brother is currently in jail now. And so I've always said, I'm not made for jail. This is not my life. I don't think I could survive, but that is the normal progression in my family.
Wow.
That's what when I say, oh, I didn't realize that my life, was not normal. Those that you fight with your cousins, but not like throwing fists at police.
Right.
But yeah, that would happen.
Wow.
And so hopefully I touched on all the parts.
Oh, you did. Wow. As you were talking, I'm just thinking about so many youth that I either know or have heard about who have similar circumstance or had similar circumstance like you had. And it's like when you don't know that there's something different, then you just think this is just normal.
This is it.
This is normal. So what about church? Did you and your family go to church at all?
No, actually, we didn't go to church. I did not grow up in church. My grandmother, so my mom's actual mom, she went to church, but she lived in Temple Hills in Maryland. And so she would come here and there. But honestly, I felt very unwanted by my grandmother during that period of time. She was busy. She was living life. I don't know. And so, but whenever we were with her, we would go to church. And so there was also a church at the end of our block, New Bethel Baptist Church. It's crazy how you remember these things. And
Yeah.
so I would go there sometimes because my friend, one of my best friends at the time, we would just like go, like they'd have like tutorial, like after school, if you needed help with school or you wanted to help other people with their schoolwork and stuff. So I had a relationship with the church that way. I would go and volunteer. I did end up going to a college preparatory high school. So that's where I differentiated from my brothers, I guess. And so because of that, part of that is you had to serve, you had to volunteer. And so I volunteered at the church. I would go and tutor kids. And so I ended up going to church then because I was there and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the people, and they were really helpful and so sweet. They would check on you. And so that's where my relationship of God started to develop. And I remember when I told my brothers that I was thinking about getting baptized. I was 15, and my older brother said, I don't know why you would do that. I hope you're not doing that because you think it's cool, because it's not. I was like, okay, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I'll just go about my life or go about my day. And so I did end up getting baptized. I remember that I got baptized. I was 15. And then like the next day, this girl I was having drama with at school tried to fight me. And I was like, I just got baptized. So I'm going to, it's those things that just happen. You're like, I remember that. So I didn't grow up in church. My family, that I grew up with, they could care less probably. But I went anyway.
You went anyway.
I called me, so I went. And so that's where I started to build that relationship. I was 16. I had they had like birth months at the church. And so like each month would like, have like parties or shindigs, or you would like visit the sick and shut in that's on, that birth month list. You would make cards, sign it and pass it out to everybody. And I was 16. I became president of the August birth month circle. I don't even know why they voted me. These people have been around for a long time, but like, oh, you want to help? Come on, So those are some of the memories I have of like first going to that church, and I, we'd visited my whole life. So yeah.
Okay. Wow. So that was at around, you said age 15 that you started going. Okay. So at 16, you lost your mom, and I want you to talk about the events leading up to your mom's death. Just kind of take us through that whole scenario, and what led to even you becoming saved. So talk about that.
Yes, I just want to say I'm so excited to share this particular portion of my story, because it's just like when I teach my kids about atoms, being a science teacher, it's so abstract that they don't understand it. But the reason that I love this part of the story is because sometimes Jesus can seem so abstract. Sometimes you don't actually see him in front of you, but there's this knowing that God is real. And so this was my knowing. This was my me and all the experiences that I have lived, met Jesus face to face. And so it actually started probably a few months before, in like that January of that year. My mom had been in jail for, I don't even remember what she was in there for, but she had been there and she was getting out, and she had called me to say, hey, I'm going to be getting out of jail. And she ended up getting out. It's about a 3-month span. And she ended up getting a job, I think at McDonald's. She ended up going to church, the same church that I had been going to. And so she completely turned her life around from whatever she had experienced before. I know very little of my mom's story. When she had me, she was 27, I think. And when she passed away, I think she was like 44. I don't know if that math is right. But when I was born, I didn't even know this till I got pregnant with my first son, that I guess she was taking crack. And so when I was born, I was on crack. I didn't know that. And I remember calling my brothers like, why is my cousin telling me that I was on crack and I was born? What are you talking about? My brother's like, well, we were getting kicked out of our apartment at that time, so we couldn't tell you, what was going on. Our stuff was on the side of the street, So I said all that to say my mom lived a very interesting lifestyle, if I can put it that way. Just the little snippets that I know. So for her to get out of jail, for her to have a job, for her to be going to church, which to me seemed unheard of, was, amazing. And I think she had a boyfriend at the time, but she's had a history of having boyfriends that would beat her up. She would come home and she'd be like black and blue, and my brothers would try to go find them. And so for her to even be in a healthy relationship, it was like, man, Mom, like, you're doing so good.
Wow. Yeah.
It was awesome to see. It was such a blessing. And so that's I'm saying all that because that's like a light that I keep, when I think about the situation that took place. So then this all took place with my mom passing away about 3 days before my 17th birthday, I believe.
Okay.
So I remember her saying, hey, what do you want to do for your birthday? We're talking about that. And I'm like, oh, no, nothing big. And I was doing some work. And she said, hey, I think her and her boyfriend were going to go wash clothes. I said, okay, yeah, let's go. So we walked to that, DC. So you just you get your stuff, you got your little cart, and you get to roll in down the street. Yeah. So we're going to the laundromat. We get there, we wash our clothes, fold the clothes. And then we're headed back from the laundromat. So we are about 1 block away from my house, right in front of the church that I have mentioned, the church that she started going to, the church that kind of helped bring me up in Christ. And we're crossing the street, but not at the crosswalk. We were jaywalking technically, but there were also kids, further down the block who were like playing basketball or football in the middle of the street. And so it's a really long block and there are apartments there. So as we're crossing the street, we walk behind a car that's parked, but there is a person there and the car is on, but he's like talking to someone and he's like the only car on the street, which is so weird. So as we cross, my mom is behind me, I'm in front of her, and I step onto the sidewalk first. Remember, we have clothes we're carrying and they're not light. And all of a sudden I just hear this sound, boom. I turn around, my mom and the car is all the way across the street because the car was in reverse and the guy didn't know it. So he went to speed off, but he was in reverse. So he hit my mom. Again, I was right in front of her. Hit her. She rolled onto the car and the car dragged her across the street. And the only reason the car stopped is because it hit a tree. So at that point, she's underneath the car. The guy is in the back seat because I don't think he had his seatbelt on. I turn around, I drop my bag, I scream, what's going on? Again, these are apartments and kids were playing football in the street. So other people were around. Everybody's running over. Well, for the 4th or 5th time, I'm telling you guys, I'm from DC. So what do? I look for the dude so I can fight him. Duh. What just happened? I turn around, my mom's, so he gets out of the car. I start fighting him in the middle of the street. Obviously, he's not fighting me back because he's in shock. Like, what just happened? I finally run over to my mom and someone was saying, she's okay. But you could see sorry for the gore, but that her, her whole head, brains and all that stuff, stuff is coming out. It's not going back in. And so the whole time they're just saying, she's okay. Finally, the ambulance comes. I don't know who called the ambulance because, I was over here fighting him. Then I came over here. They take her to the hospital. And I'm sitting there waiting for them to finish examining her, waiting for them to tell me, your mom's okay, everything's good, we're just going to bandage her up or whatever. And as I'm sitting there, they're asking me these random questions. Is your mom pregnant? And I'm thinking, why would they ask me that question? But apparently she had a bunch of fluid in her stomach that made her stomach, project out. Or maybe that's where she got hit. I don't know. But I didn't understand that these questions were not necessarily because they were being rude or anything, but because of the situation in which my mom was in. Well, obviously, my mom ends up passing away I think the worst part of that entire situation, for me anyway, was not necessarily that I saw it happen, because yeah, I mean, that's pretty bad, but that I had to tell my older brother, who, you know, my mom was his light, his shining star, if you will, that my mom had passed away. I had to tell him that. And he just broke down. I was like in a position where I had to be strong for him. And that was different. And I had not experienced that. And I was not ready to do that, if you will. But I did it anyway, because I was like, I remember all the times he was strong for me. So it's the least I could do. My little brother obviously was distraught as well. But my oldest brother, he had recently, also at the start of this year, left, kind of cut ties with everybody, and he had moved to Georgia with his wife and his son. So we never really got a chance. I think he heard about it, but we never really got a chance to tell him, you know, in person that, you know, my mom had passed away. And so I always say, as I look back on it, one, it was the moment Jesus saved me. Because if I had been behind my mom had stepped on the sidewalk first, I would have been dead. It would have been me, because it was literally a split second. There was no, oh, it's time to think about it. She was right behind me. And I know Jesus saved me that moment. And so it makes it easier to go back and to say, you know, Jesus is my savior because of that exact moment. But also I think about my mom and the life that she lived. And if she had not that I want my mom to pass away, of course not, but God saved her at that moment too, because I don't know what she would have went back to if she had still been here. I remember her funeral not too long after that, and a lot of people came to see her, you know, as to say goodbye. And there were people who were on crack that were there. I could tell when you grow up around, you know, like, and you're like, she could have went back to that. She could have been, you know, doing that again, or back into jail. I don't know. So that's the situation that took place. Yeah, it was a hard time overall. And it was kind of like when my world like crashed and I realized, oh, wow, like the life I thought I was living, that was like not horrible, but not that great. It was like an eye opener, if you will. Yeah.
Wow. What an incredible testimony, Algenia. Wow. So how did you finish high school? What was that like?
So to follow in the footsteps of my mom, I actually was in a relationship at the time that it happened. And I don't know where I get this work ethic from, but I have been working since I was like 14. Because in DC, you can do like summer youth program or whatever. So in the summertime, I worked, and I had met a guy, and yeah, he was a lot older than me. And so I spent a lot of time with him. I spent even more time, even though, you know, I think that's segueing. I think that's a huge misconception. People think Jesus is going to save me. My life is going to be perfect. No, Jesus saved me. He did. So I'm not dead yet. Right. But my life was not perfect, because I was still over here hanging out with this guy and spending the night at his house. And it was allowed, because I was so distraught after that happening. And I went to what was comfortable, instead of running to God, because I didn't have a lot of experience with God. So I didn't understand that, you know, God could be a comforter too. I didn't fully understand that. So for high school, I wanted to drop out before my mom even, not drop out of high school, but like go to a different school before my mom even passed away. Because it was a college preparatory school, it was really hard. Remember I said I was like kind of like teacher's pet. I was really quiet, and I did really well in school. But I got to this school, and like it challenged me, because the curriculum and everything that they expected you to do, they're preparing you for college. And in DC, you know, nobody in my family went to college. So I'm the first one getting my mind molded for this particular thing. And I'm like, wait a minute, they didn't go, so I don't really have to go, right? Like, maybe I could just go to a regular high school and it'll be fine. And I remember my mom being like, no, you're going to go to this school and you're going to stay here. And so because of that, because I had that conversation with her before she passed away, I ended up staying at the school that I was at. Now, the first few months after that happened, because this happened in August, and so this was the start of the school year, or actually, I think in DC, school didn't start till in September, maybe. I can't remember, but I don't think, like, I was starting my my last year in high school, and so I struggled the first couple of months for sure, maybe even more, 3 months, maybe. I remember I was taking calculus and I was like, I don't care what this lady's saying. I had to take the ACT. I slept the whole time. I think they give you a point for like putting your name on there or something. I think I got that 1 point. That was it. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But the point is, I went and took the test and I didn't really take it. So I struggled, but something happened. And I couldn't even tell you what, just God sustaining me, and I didn't even know it. But by the second half of the school year, I was able to do whatever needed to be done to be able to graduate high school. A really good GPA, because I started applying for colleges at that point. And that made a huge difference because I had a goal in mind. I had always had a goal in mind that I wanted to own a business and I wanted to have a hair salon, and that was something that ran in our family, that we all are able to do hair. My grandma, my mom, my cousin. So I was like, I want to own a business, and I knew that. So that goal just kind of got ignited, and I was like, no, I'm going to college. So whatever I need to do, I'm going.
Wow. Okay. So you said that you held on to your mom's words to finish at that school, which is why you did. And so I want to back up a little bit. It sounds like you and your mom got closer before her death. Is that correct?
Yes. We were always close. I was always like a mama's girl, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But we definitely got closer because she stayed with my great grandmother at that time. And so, like, when my mom was calling me that she had gotten out of jail, I was actually at a friend's house, just hanging out, doing what you do, spending the night, whatever. And so once my mom came home, she had that job. She was bringing food home too, another important thing, so I was at home with her. And so we enjoyed a really good time before she passed away. We got really close, hence her starting to go to church, because, we would go together, or sometimes if I didn't go, she would still go, which was, new and different.
Wow.
And so, yeah, we got close for sure. We got even closer, and I was able to kind of ask her some of those questions that, I didn't know the answer to, or even just to spend time with her, because I didn't know she wasn't going to be around.
Right. Wow. Okay. So, wow. I'm soaking in your story. I'm just soaking it in, and I'm also just, and you hit on this. I'm also just thankful that your mom started attending church, shortly before her death. We don't always understand why things happen the way that they do, or the timing, or none of that. But to have that memory of, but my mom, she was going to church even when I wasn't going. You know what I mean? Like, wow. So you graduate high school, and now you are heading towards Morgan State, right?
Yes.
Okay. So now you go to Baltimore. Where were you spiritually? And how was it still healing from the grief of your mom's passing?
Okay. So spiritually, I was fairly young in faith, because while I had, got baptized when I was 15, and I had, been going to church here and there, not, anywhere near consistent. I was not strong in anything, honestly. I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know how to read scripture. I would always fall asleep. I'm like, good Lord, God, is there a more exciting version? Because this is boring. That's what it seemed like. Like it was a lot, but you realize, you learn that that's part of having faith. I want to please God. I want to know more of him. So I go and I seek his word. I'll take it however I can get it. But it takes time to get there.
Yeah.
So when I got to college, or even a little bit before that, I mentioned that boyfriend. So I was 16 when I met him, and he was 22. I was working at the zoo in DC. And so that's where I met him at. And so when we went to college, he actually, well, not when we didn't go to college, but it seemed like it, because his uncle lived in Baltimore. And so during that summer, as I was transitioning, as I was about to go to college and stuff, we would go up there and visit and kind of hang out and stuff and stay at his uncle's house. And I would get to see more of Baltimore before I even went to college. But God was already doing something in that relationship, because we were, engaging in activities we should not have been. Well, I should not have been, and so God was starting to get on me about those things. Again, I'm so young in faith that I'm like, okay, is this God or is it my conscience or what? Right. Telling me like, hey, you need to slow down. You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be, engaging like that. And, I guess if it's too much, you can always cut it out, Danielle. But
oh, you're fine.
Frank, before I was even dating him, I had dated like, quite a number of people. And once I lost my virginity, I was giving it away freely. If I felt like I wanted to, then I would. So for me to even be with this guy for the time that I had been with him, I think at that point had been almost a year, was rare, because I didn't stay with people for a long time. For me to be so young, you're young. You're like, oh, this isn't working. I'm moving on. Right. And so our relationship was the longest relationship I've been with. Again, I was young. And then also, he just was there for me at a really, really hard time of my life, which the enemy will do. So that's just right. There. He will be there. He's going to be there too. So I said all that to say that God started working on me and our relationship, and this isn't the relationship for you. It was, very toxic. He was very emotionally abusive, and I'd already experienced that with, people in my family. So I wasn't used to that. I was used to that. Right. But God's like, you shouldn't be living like this. You need to be changing some things. So when I got to college, it was a breath of fresh air. It was a relief, because I didn't have to be with this guy all the time. And so he actually moved to Baltimore. He got a job in Towson. And I also had a job. Like I said, I worked when I was in high school. So I got a job as well at the same place. So we worked together. At that point, we were leaving classes at like 7 o'clock. No, probably like I left class at like 4 o'clock or something. I would get on the bus. I would go to Towson, go to work. I would get off at 10, and then I would come back to the dormitory. So my faith was starting to grow as God was starting to lead me. But I had this relationship that I was in that God was really saying you need to sever ties to. And I didn't know what that looked like or what that meant or what that was going to be, because I had no guidance for it.
Right.
So,
okay.
Ask me a second question.
The other question was, how were you processing grief?
I think I was processing it in the relationship, like by being in the relationship. That's the best way I could put it. Because what I remember most is the relationship, and not necessarily that my mom, was not around, because, as you can recall, she wasn't around a lot. And so it would be one of those things when I was younger, I'm always wondering, is my mom still alive? Is she okay? And then when she would come back, it's like, yes, okay, she's good. We're good. And so this time it was, I don't want to say closure, but for a lack of a better term, I didn't have to worry about my mom anymore because she wasn't here, unfortunately. So I think I put a lot of emotion and whatever was tied to that in that relationship with this person.
Okay. So at what point did the relationship end?
It ended about, I think I dated him for like 2.5 years. And I had got to the point where we had a lot of conversations about, hey, we need to abstain from this sexual activity that we're engaging in. I want to live right. I want to live better. At this point, I had been getting bused to living waters. I think at that point, I think I started getting bused to living waters in freshman year. That's when the van will come pick you up. And
Right.
again, I was not consistent. I would go here and there. I met a lot of my friends that were Christian in my dormitory in freshman year. And so I would do a lot of things with them. Like we would go to prayer meetings, or we would go to this or go to that. And so my relationship with Christ really started to evolve when I got to college. Before that, I remember going to like this youth camp through my church. And it was then that I had made a commitment. God, I'm going to, stop, the things that I'm doing that aren't healthy, that are not pleasing to you. And I'm going to turn my life around. It was such a life transforming camp for me because I was able to see all the sin that I was living in and know that was wrong and not normal, like I'm used to. And so I took that with me. I did that, I think, right before I went to college, and I took that with me to college. So that's why, the arguments with my current boyfriend at that time started to ensue because I had went to this camp, but obviously he was too old, he couldn't go, and he probably would have gone anyway. But he was like, I guess, and I think he agreed to even changing some things just to please me, if that makes sense. Because I wanted that. So he said, okay, yeah, we'll try. But then that wouldn't happen. And so I think I was at home on break, and I was at his house, his mom's house. And we got into some huge argument. And I was like, that's it, I'm done. And I asked his mom to take me to the train station because, he was a bum and he didn't work. I mean, he worked, but like he had stopped working. He didn't have a car, and a frivolous lifestyle, the lifestyle that I didn't want to live. So I asked his mom to take me to the train station, and that was the end of that.
Wow.
I remember
what year of college?
This is my second year.
Sophomore year. Okay.
I think, or it's about to be the start of my second year.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I remember I mentioned all these different events I was going to in freshman year. And freshman year, I think it was freshman year, I might have met my now husband at like one of those events. And I remember telling the boyfriend that I had at the time about him, and he's like, oh, I don't think this guy is legit. I think he likes you, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, it's not like that. We're cool. Like, he doesn't even know me. He's not paying me no mind, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And so I just remember that one small connection, and then for us to end up where we are now, it was just crazy. But yeah, wow. It was actually back home in DC that we broke up, and that relationship ended. But basically, I wanted to live for God, and he did not. And so I was like, I'm done. Yeah. If you are God, I'm choosing God. So.
That's right. And I have a similar testimony. Girl, I have a similar testimony. It's my freshman year as well. I was like, I got to chase after God. I got to. So similar story. So did he still try to be with you after you broke things off?
Yeah. Yes, he did. He, I don't know if there are stages for these type of things, but there was like a stage level where at first he's like, hey, I'm so sorry. Like we can make it work. Like, I'm going to change my life around too. You're going to see, let's get back together. And I have this thing I told you before, I was with, numerous people. Once I cut you off, I'm done. Because I am a very loyal person. So once I decide like, we're done. But I think wrapped up in that relationship was, like I said, all that grief and angst that I had about my mom. And that's what made it harder. That's what I was really breaking from, my comfort blanket. You know, this person I had been with through the hardest time of my life, when my mom, you know, did that same day that had happened, he came and comforted me there while I was experiencing all that. So yeah, he first started off, hey, you know, we can make it work. And I'm like, no. Then, you know, they're like, all right, that's not going to work. So let's be friends. And I'm like, I don't really do that, but okay, if you want to text me here and there, I won't block your number, and that's fine. So that was okay for a little bit, and he would text me here and there. I hope you have a great day, beautiful. You know, things that he never said to me before. And you're like, bruh, who are you? You're really trying to get me here, right? You, sir. And then it turned into the very last part where I would get nasty messages, you know, like, never gonna have anybody better. Your life is gonna be horrible. If you ever come to DC, he started to threaten me that, you know, this was gonna happen. I'm like, dude, you're from Maryland. You're not even really from DC. So I know you're threatening me. And my brothers live there. So get out of here. You know, so I'm just so like unbothered by this. I'm like, whatever. I'm here in Baltimore. You know where I'm at. You know where my college, like, because I was with him for so long. Right. Really gonna do something. You're gonna do something and not send a text message while you're in a completely different place. No. So, at that point, once he threatened me, I blocked him. And everything he gave me, I threw it away and I trashed it. And it was gone because I was like, I'm done with that. And yeah, I think it allowed, it was, even if I can even say, he was an idol. And so it was the final, like, removing the high place, removing those idols, even those little trinkets, you know, are idols that remind me of this particular person. And so once those idols were moved, in comes my that's when my relationship with Mike started.
Okay. Wow. So talk about that. Talk about that relationship starting with Mike, and then also coupled with your spiritual growth.
Okay. So at this point, and this is really why I ended up connecting with Mike, is because I was going to join ANQ. ANQ is a Christian sorority / fraternity, and they have those on college campuses as an alternative to some of the other sororities that are there. And so I'm this Christian now, you know, I have some years on me, and I'm like, I'm going to church and starting to live my life right. I left that old dude behind. I'm like, hey, God, what's for me, you know? And I see some of my friends that I had been with, interacted with and stuff, and we'd been going to all these different events, and they're thinking about doing it too. And I say, you know what? I'm going to find out more information. And when I don't know if it was in college, probably like high school, maybe. I remember, so I told you guys that I was, you know, this very quiet, very reserved little kid. But by the time I got to college, I am my full sassy self. And I'm like, I don't have those fears anymore. If I have something to say, it's going to be said. And so I remember seeing Mike, and I had went to an event, and I knew he was the president of ANQ at that time. And I said, well, I'm going to go ask him. He would know he can tell me information about this. So I walked up to him. Hey, how are you? How's it going? I know you're the president of ANQ, but I just wanted to ask you some questions. If that's okay, I'm thinking about joining. And my husband's the complete opposite. He is reserved. He is quiet. And he's like, who is this crazy lady coming up to me? And he's like, I remember him not saying too much, but, you know, just come to the events and you can find out more information. And I was like, okay. And I was thinking, you didn't really tell me nothing. I need to go somewhere else. So that was the first time. He likes to say that I stalked him, or we tell this story that I stalked him, because that was the first time I came up to him. But then we both majored in business. Remember, I said I wanted to own my own business. And so that's what I went to college for. And he was in college for the same thing. So I worked 2 jobs. I worked outside of college, but I also worked work study. And so I would get off the work study, but it would be a separate time for when class ended. Like it would end at like 10:30. And I think classes would end maybe like like it would be 10:50 or 9:50 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I would leave and he would be leaving. And I was like, your class is over? He's like, nah, I'm just going to go. And I was like, he's like, I got stuff to do. And I was like, okay. And so that's how I started seeing him all the time. Okay. And that's why it was implied that I stalked him because because I was leaving on time, but he was not. He was over here. He would go to class and then he'd be like, I just leave. I'm like, how do you do that?
Right.
So as I started to see him in the business building more, I would ask him how he's doing and stuff. And this, at this point, this is my, it's my third year, maybe. No, it's the end of like my second year. And I think he's about to graduate. And I remember him saying, yeah, I have like a lot of stuff to do. I have a lot on my plate and I got to do this and I got to do that. And so he mentioned a couple things. And so when I would see him next, I would say, hey, did you end up doing that thing you needed to do at, at this registrar or whatever? He's like, oh, thanks for reminding me. I forgot. And then he ended up saying like I was his assistant and stuff because I would remind him of stuff. But again, at this point, I just see him around campus.
Right.
Words or nothing. I had went to one event with him in DC. It's really big to have go-go's and this live music party situation that you go to. And so before I was saved, I would go to those and negative things would happen. There would be shootings. And I remember my friend one time got lockjaw because people started fighting and she got hit in the face. And so it was always a negative thing. Well, I got to college in Baltimore, completely different. Yeah. And I remember going to a Bible study and Mike was there and a couple of other people, and they were talking about this go-go, but for Christians. And I say, what?
Okay.
Talking to me, they were talking to themselves. And again, old and sassy. So I went over and I heard y'all talking. Deal with this go-go. How do I get there? Where is it? And he's like, oh, we're all gonna go. You should just ride with us. And I was like, okay, let's go.
Right. Uh-huh.
Do it, anything that I can. And so this kind of speaks to my relationship with Christ. I'm gonna seek him however I can. I don't care who's in my way. And so we went to this go-go and he drove, I think he had a rental car at the time, and he ended up I think we were talking, but there were like 3 other huge guys. Caleb Asamu was there and his twin brother, and then John was there. And we were all in the car, but I was the only one talking to Mike because I'm nosy. So I'm asking him all these questions. Maybe I can finally get my answers, And he ends up driving so fast. He's going like 100 miles per hour, but it's a rental car. So he didn't even notice it. Next thing you know, he goes by the police and he gets pulled over.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And he gets like a $200 ticket.
Oh my gosh.
He would see me again around campus. They never let it down. Like, you're the one who got me that $300 ticket because I was talking to him the whole time and he didn't notice and all this stuff.
So you were the distraction.
I was the distraction. I wasn't even in the front seat. I was in the back seat. But okay. And I think I had to go to court for that and everything. It was like a whole thing. But so these are just little tidbits of like our friendship just starting to grow. And we completely just started off as friends. We went to some of the same events, obviously him being a president, and he would put a lot of the events on, and I would go to any and every event that I could. Nigerian Bible study, I'm there. CCU, I'm there. I'm going to the interest meeting. I ain't part of the committee. I'm just going anyway. I need Jesus, so I'm gonna go.
That's right.
So that's kind of like how our relationship started to grow. But my relationship with God started to grow because you find that when you seek God, he answers and he's there. And so as I started to do that, I'm meeting more people who are also in love with God. And I'm like, it's not just I'm the only one. It's that there's a whole group of people that are excited about Christ. I remember going to, I think it was a worship night you had? Some place. It was beautiful. It wasn't
that I had?
Yes. Maybe you were the MC at the event or something. Was it at Towson maybe? I remember me and Mike went. And you were there and you were speaking, or like maybe you were the MC or something, but there were people, they were singing, and I don't remember the name of it, but I remember doing that. And that was one of the first times that I met you.
Okay.
I'll have to ask Mike. He'll give me more information.
Yeah. There were so many events because I was at so many Christian events on campus. So yeah, I would need to know specifically which one that was. But wow, as you were talking, I'm just thinking about how many of us were at Living Waters at the same time, right? There was like this whole Morgan crew, and then there was this Towson crew, right? I think y'all beat us as far as numbers go, though. There was always more Morganites there. But it was just amazing because God allowed us to have such a community where we could truly seek God together. And there was such a hunger for God. There was such a just a community that we were able to just have and share just our growth, our growth with one another, our testimonies with one another. And that was actually something that I had for you, a question that I had for you. Had you ever shared what happened with your mom with anybody while you were in school, or was that something you just kind of kept to yourself?
I can't say that I shared, that I remember sharing, but at that point, again, I was like bold and sassy. So I would tell anybody anything at any point. So it doesn't mean that I didn't share. I was not like closed off. I would tell people about my relationships. Like when it comes to first getting saved, that fire of first getting saved really hits you strong, right? And so even if you wanted to shut up about it, you couldn't. Like you can't. And so I would tell anything. I would tell, but I can't say that I necessarily recall specific instances of me necessarily saying it, but I'm sure I shared it. But yeah, because I wasn't close. I wasn't, once Christ really got into me, if that makes sense, then, it was no holds bar. And I would, anything that I need to say to help save somebody else's life, I'm going to do it. So, and then me and Mike, actually, we joined Living Waters at the same time. So we went through, which is so crazy because I think he was going before them, but I guess maybe he didn't join. So before I said I would get picked up by, like, the van would come and pick us up. But then there was a point where I guess we started being more friends. We were still friends, and he would come and pick me up and take me to church. And so we went through the new members class together. And so that, again, he is already really strong in his faith. But I started to also gain that traction for the same thing.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So at what point did y'all enter into a relationship?
Okay. So after a lot of stalking, I'm joking. After we had hung out for a little while, a few months, I think at that point, he had graduated. He had invited me to his graduation party in Prince George's County, where his parents were. And that's where I got to meet his family, all of his sisters and all of his siblings, his friends, everything. And I remember his nephew, who's like 21 now. He's like, "Ooh, Mike got a girlfriend," but I was not his girlfriend. We were just hanging out, right? And so that's where I got to like meet a lot of his family. And we spent that summer together a lot. And so we would go to events and stuff like that. And so one day he invited me to the gun range, because if anyone knows Michael, he is about his firearms. He used to be a police officer. And so I was like, no, I've never been to the gun range. I think that would be a cool experience. But again, bold and sassy. So I already planned, when we have this conversation, we're going to meet up and all this stuff. He's going to pick me up. We're going to go. I'm going to have a good conversation with him, because I'm not going to be just hanging out and he's not making nothing official. And, what is this? Are we just friends? What's going on?
Right.
So we get together. He picks me up. And I think this is before we go to the gun range or after. I can't remember. But we're sitting in the car and he's going to take me somewhere else. To my grandma's house. And because at that point I'd built a relationship with her. And I said, I just really wanted to talk to you, have a conversation, because like, what is this? Like, we're hanging out a lot more than just like everybody else is hanging out. And
Mm-hmm.
I just can't have no relationship stop me from getting to Christ. So
Right.
friends, are we just friends? I don't want to,
Yeah.
because it's so hard to read. I feel like I'm like a book. Like, you can read how I feel, my emotions on my face.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is hard to crack. And so he took other people to the gun range. He, just to brag on my husband a little bit, but in college, he had so many friends that were females that he would not like in a like, oh, whatever, but like in a little sister way, like he would help them learn how to drive and get their license. He would help people like, oh, if you're struggling, I remember he would take them to the gun range. Hey, try this different experience. Like, he was always helping people no matter what. Like, oh, you're going to have a party, I'll come help set up. Like, that's his personality. He's always like that. So I'm thinking maybe he's just treat me like he treat everybody else. And I'm just not used to it. I sit down, I have this conversation with him. So what are we? What's happening? What are we? He looks at me, he says,
woo, what did he say? Well, if you want to know what he said and you want to hear the rest of Algenia's story, please make sure that you come back to tune in next Thursday, December 26th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify to see part 2 of this episode featuring Miss Algenia White, where the title is Becoming Saved After Witnessing My Mom's Death. Y'all, please, please, please come back to see part 2. If you haven't yet, go ahead and like this episode, share it with someone else that they may be blessed, and also leave a comment letting us know something that stood out from this episode today. If you haven't yet, also subscribe to the channel Breakthrough Conversations. Until next time, everyone, please enjoy the holiday with your family and friends. Merry Christmas to you all. Be blessed and have a wonderful day.